All right, so I wanted to talk a little bit about this book, Your Brain on Food by Gary Wenk, because this is a really good read. This is an awesome book, so I wanted to say a few things about it. Because looking for a light read, this is really entertaining, really cool. Just learn about a whole bunch of awesome stuff. This is a good book. So Gary Wenk, the author of this one, he's a professor of quite a few different things, I think: psychology, neuroscience, and medical genetics among them. But yeah, and he's a guy that's won some awards for his teaching, and when you read the book, that kind of you kind of get that sense. You kind of get the sense that this is written by someone who's really good at teaching stuff. Um, yeah, the book's written for a pretty broad audience, but yeah, that's kind of what I like about it, is that, like, well, on one hand, it goes into a lot of detail about specific neurotransmitters and specific substances that people ingest, and like why they do what they do and have the effect that they have. It's actually really easy to follow. It's pretty easy to understand for someone like me who hasn't taken a science class in about a decade. Um, I'll say this much: there's one small caveat I would make, and so the full title is Your Brain on Food: How Chemicals Control Your Thoughts and Feelings. And I think that title, at least the first part of it, is a little bit misleading, because having finished the book, I do kind of get the sense that he talks more about what you would typically think of as drugs than he talks about food per se. And toward the beginning, he talks a little about why he does that, because it's kind of a blurry line when it comes to a lot of what he's talking about. It's sometimes a little bit of an arbitrary distinction, um, partly because of things like coffee. But yeah, it's super interesting. Just to give you a sense of some of the things he talks about, it's just some of those questions like, why does chocolate make some people really angry? What would happen if you ate an entire canister of nutmeg? Um, if I recall, there's possibilities that can act as an aphrodisiac, but mainly it just gives you really bad diarrhea and really horrifying hallucinations for a little while. Um, he talks about nicotine to a fair extent in the book. So some questions like, what is it about like nicotine's effect on the brain that people can smoke a couple of cigarettes and that can make them more alert, make it easier for them to do like routine tasks, whereas chain smoking during high pressure situations can actually make someone more relaxed. I think he mentions that more than 60% of adults with ADHD smoke cigarettes, compared with like a little less than 30% of the population at large, which, as someone with ADHD, I found that really interesting. Um, why does tryptophan actually make you drowsy? If I recall, the answer is basically no. Like, it can have that effect, but most meats that have it in it also have amino acids that might also have the opposite effect. Um, yeah, ton of cool stuff in the book. Gets into placebo effects a little bit at the end, and why people believe that Ginkgo biloba has. Am I saying that right? Whatever it's called. Ginkgo biloba. I know so little about it. I don't even know how it's pronounced or what the actual name of it is. But yeah, it's toward the end he talks about the placebo effect a lot. But yeah, it's just very that I liked the pace of the book. It's not super long, so you can see it's like a couple hundred pages and about that much text per page, and it rolls along nicely. It'll talk about a topic for a couple of pages and then move on to something semi-related, and seems to keep moving, which is nice. If it's one particular thing you're reading about in a moment and here isn't that interesting to you, he's going to get to something else pretty soon. Yeah, one passage I did want to read because I think this gives you a sense of how this sounds rhetorically and what makes it kind of entertaining. 16th century Central American Indians, according to the naturalist Francisco Hernandez, called these mushrooms Tenantecatl, possibly translated God's flesh or simply sacred mushrooms. Albert Hoffman, the scientist credited with the inadvertent discovery of LSD when investigating its effect, is also credited with isolating the active ingredient of this mushroom in 1958. He claimed to have ingested 32 dried mushrooms, probably 10 times the usual dose taken today, to determine their effects, and wrote that they were similar to those he had experienced with LSD. It's worth stating the obvious at this point. Please do not ever experiment with unknown plant extracts on yourself, especially if there is any risk that they might affect your brain. I know this warning seems self-evident, but I've had too many students bring empty vials to my class saying, "I took this last night and I was wondering if you could tell me what it was." These questions might actually seem appropriate when you're 19 years old and feel immortal. He'll make references to those situations from time to time because it sounds like he has some interesting students that come through the classes he takes. But yeah, really, really, really good read. Your Brain on Food by Gary Wenk. Definitely recommend checking it out. See y'all later.